Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays, hosted by someone's favorite film buff, Nathan. I love movies and I want to share that with you. From old originals to cult classics and foreign favorites, along with straight up drivel, WWW is your place for all things movies. Stick around and we'll leave you with a movie to watch over the weekend with your family or that special someone. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. 88 won the Burg, your movie central. Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays. My name is Nathan, the host of What to Watch Wednesdays, the show where we talk about 3 movies all in the same night. For tonight's episode, I'd like to give a quick shout out to any regular listeners of mine, because tonight is going to be a really good kind of full circle moment for What to Watch Wednesdays. For those of you who have never tuned in before, let me give you a quick background before I introduce the 3 movies on our watch list tonight. For the past 2 weeks, I've been really trying to keep a theme going between my episodes of What to Watch Wednesdays. 2 weeks ago, I talked about the first 3 Alien movies. Alien, Aliens, and Alien 3. Then, because James Cameron directed Aliens, I figured it'd be a really good idea to go on to another series that he was closely tied to that also had some kind of relation to the Alien movies, because it was a child of the 80s and action-heavy, sci-fi heavy. So last week, I talked about the first 3 Terminator movies. Terminator, Terminator 2, Judgment Day, and Terminator 3. This week, I figured it'd be a really good way to kind of close the gap if we talked about 3 movies from a series that's kind of indirectly related to Terminator in that it's a child of the 80s, action sci-fi horror, and the first one, at the very least, features Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's right. Today's episode is going to be covering the first 2 Predator movies, including the prequel that came out a couple years ago. But to properly introduce them, the first movie on our watch list is going to be Predator from 1987, followed by Predator 2 from 1990, and Prey from 2022. Quite frankly, the reason that I'm talking about Prey as my 3rd movie on the watch list tonight is because even though it was fun watching Terminator 3 last week, I did not like watching Alien 3. I frankly did not want to watch Predators from 2010 or The Predator from 2018. I much rather wanted to watch Prey from 2022, so we're going to talk about Prey from 2022. But that's going to be our 3rd movie on the watch list. So we got a while to wait before we get into why that was a good or bad idea. I'm not going to tell you if it was a good or bad idea. You have to listen to the rest of the show to figure it out. Before we get to that, after our break, we'll talk about our first movie, that being Predator from 1987. So stick around. Your Movie Central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our first movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Predator from 1987, available to watch now on Hulu. For the basic plot summary of the original Predator, we follow Dutch, the leader of an independent military extraction team that specializes in rescue missions rather than assassinations, as he so puts it, because it was the 80s and they had to say a lot of cool stuff like that to make it seem tougher than it actually is. But essentially, Dutch is dropped into Central America with his team to save a minister whose helicopter went down. As they go deep into the jungle, they realize that they're not alone there. Not just other people, possibly the minister, who has escaped the helicopter, but a possibly unknown inhuman entity. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the basic idea of Predator, it's this alien that can hunt down human beings really well because it can turn invisible and has a lot of high-tech alien gizmos. It's cool. It's really cool. And by extension, the original movie, The Predator, or just Predator, is really cool because it has the Predator in it. If I'm being honest with you, that's the big thing about Predator, is that it's got the character, the Predator, in it, which makes it cool. Interestingly, though, when I say that out loud, you may be thinking that's the only thing that makes it cool. And weirdly enough, no. I'm going to push back on that immediately and say, for the first time ever, when I've been reviewing a movie, I would say that Predator has the opposite problem of the Predator alien being the only cool or good or remotely interesting thing about it. No, actually. Predator, the original movie, if it didn't have the Predator in it, it wouldn't have been remembered as much, but it wouldn't have been bad. Weirdly enough, it doesn't really implode in on itself when you remove the original creature from the movie. Where's my train of thought going with this? Let me explain it to you in a very simple term. Because for the past 2 weeks, I've been talking about Alien and Terminator. They're really good examples. So let's take the first Alien movie, right? You remove the xenomorph from the first Alien movie. It all falls apart. There's no conflict. There's nothing to deal with. They're just kind of sent drifting through space and nothing really happens. The alien is what drives the story forward. It's what kind of kicks it off. And in my opinion, when we're introduced to the xenomorph for the first time in Alien, in terms of the facehugger that is, that's when the movie gets good. Terminator is exactly the same way. Without the Terminator chasing after Sarah Connor, there is no movie. There is no tension, there's no setup, there's no real sense of urgency. Predator, if you remove the alien creature running throughout the woods, what you are left with is a, albeit fairly generic, but still incredibly functional 80s action movie where Arnold Schwarzenegger goes into the Central American jungle to save a minister and doesn't find the minister, and then is forced to survive in the wilderness while members of his team are being hunted down and killed by, let's say, a bear. It works completely fine when you remove the alien with the invisible technology, right? And I'm not saying that they should go back and remake the movie and remove the alien predator thing. No. That is not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that it could have existed on its own, separate of the Predator, and it just wouldn't have been remembered as much, but it still would have been okay. Maybe it would have gotten a slight cult following among a few people here and there, but it wouldn't have turned into a franchise like the series did because of this first movie. That's the big signifier to me there, that it's just kind of interesting to look at it from that perspective then, because again, with the examples of Alien and Terminator, they turned into franchises again because of their core concept of the xenomorph and the Terminator, right? And it's so funny to just stand here and say out loud, without the Predator, it just wouldn't have been a franchise, but the movie would have been fine. That's just really weird to say about a first movie, and it drives me crazy to think about how I've never been able to give that assessment of a movie before. I wouldn't even call it a compliment or, I suppose, a criticism of it. I'd say it's just a weird neutral thing that I'm just kind of still trying to swallow. I'm just like, is that just my opinion, or could it really work? And the more I think about it, the more you could just like replace the scenes with the actual alien with a bear, such as finding the actual minister, right? It's a very gruesome scene, so I won't go into much detail, but I mean, just remove some gruesome stuff and it's like, oh yeah, a bear did that. Okay, I get that in the setup of the movie, it feels like it's not a bear, but that's not really my point. The setup of the original movie relies on not needing to have the Predator be on screen for the first at least 20 minutes. And first impressions are important to movies as much as they are to people, to music, to literally anything out there. It still applies to movies. So when your first impression of a movie is there is no alien creature on screen, this is just Arnold Schwarzenegger being dropped into the jungle with his group of maniac muscly morons. That was a great alliteration. When it's just that, I just have this strange first impression of, well, do you really need the alien creature? Of course, the original movie justifies having the Predator in it. I'm just saying, it would just take a few editing tricks and just putting a bear over the Predator to make it no longer be about the Predator. I've spent way too long on this point, and I don't know if you all are getting it, but I hope you do. I don't dislike the original movie, and I don't want to discredit the fact that they had a very creative, innovative idea for this creature, and I don't ever want it to be misconstrued that I think the Predator is a bad design, a bad creature, a bad idea. I think the movie could have just stood on its own. And it's really interesting to think about it from that perspective. I will say that even with the Predator in there, with or without it, it is an 80s action movie, which means it's not that deep. It's not exactly the most cerebral experience. I would say it captures terror really well with the other soldiers. Not really a horror type of feel, more of a claustrophobic terror in a very open jungle. It's really good at achieving that feeling. And I will also say that with it being the Central American jungle, I was surprised at how pro-Vietnam the original Predator movie comes off as being. I'm both surprised and unsurprised, I suppose, because it was clearly intentional to have some form of attitude towards Vietnam with the jungle that they're dropped into specifically. From the weapons that they're carrying and from the way it's behaving and from the way the Predator traverses the trees, there has to be some connection to Vietnam there, the Vietnam War specifically. And the only reason that I don't want to dive deeper into it, half of it being that there's no real reason to and we should move on, and I'm not exactly the smartest enough to really break that down in even 3 minutes. But I will also admit the original movie has the hokey 80s charm where it takes itself way too seriously that it ends up being kind of funny to the point where it really masks that feeling of Vietnam. If I'm being honest with you, I don't think I really noticed it until the second time around that there was anything pro-Vietnam. I just thought, man, the jungle looks like Vietnam on my first watch through. And then on my second time around, I'm like, man, this is kind of pro-Vietnam. Kind of pro-Vietnam. That's interesting, saying an 80s movie is kind of anything. But it's a really good segue into our next movie on our watch list, which is definitely not kind of anything. When we get back from the break, we'll jump into Predator 2, so stick around for that. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our second movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Predator 2 from 1990, available to watch now on Hulu. For the basic plot summary of Predator 2, although it released in 1990, it is set in 1997, as an LA cop by the name of Mike Harrigan begins investigating a series of strange murders taking place all across LA, with the targets ranging from police officers to leaders of gangs. As he essentially works his way through the case and tries to figure out who's causing all the death, he bumps elbows with the Special Agent Keyes, played by Gary Busey, of course, who seems to know a lot more than he's letting on. How interesting. How very interesting. Let's see where this goes, is what I said during the first 5 minutes of Predator 2, and then when I saw where it went, I went, this is where it's going. Okay, what? Let me kind of put a question in your mouth, audience, if you'll allow me to. I will essentially roleplay as any audience member who's going to ask the general questions about my opinions on a movie, and I'll play myself as well, responding to those questions. Okay? Ready? Let's do this. So, you'd probably ask, was I glad that I watched Predator 2 after watching the original Predator? My response to that is, I had fun watching Predator 2. You'd then ask me, well, was it a good movie? I would respond that by saying I had a good time watching it. You would then ask me, well, would you recommend watching it? And I would say, I had fun watching Predator 2. And then you'd probably ask me, did you have fun watching Predator 2? And I'd say, I had fun watching Predator 2. I think you get the point. Predator 2 is a movie that I had fun watching. Is that the only thing I have to say about it? No. But it is the main kind of circle point that I'm going to keep coming back to over and over again unless I move on. So let's move on. How do I start? Well, you know how I had the strange sort of compliment or criticism or neutral statement that the original Predator kind of could stand on its own 2 feet without the Predator. Well, Predator 2 doesn't have a similar type of compliment or criticism. This is a compliment, but it's a compliment I don't think I've ever given to any other movie. And that is when I say to you that the second half of Predator 2 is better than the first half, but I like the first half more. What? It's making my own head spin. Don't worry. If you're confused by that statement, I'm going to break it down for you, but I'm still a bit confused myself. Let's start off with the first half of Predator 2. Predator 2 opens up in Los Angeles during a heat wave and a crime wave. There's gangs running all over the city, blasting each other and fighting over turf, with a bunch of cops getting involved. Very chaotic to begin with as a situation. Thankfully, the filmmakers were like, let's make it crazier. And when I say thankfully, I hope I should clarify now that I'm being sarcastic. Unfortunately, the filmmakers went a bit too far trying to be as chaotic as the actual events happening on screen, because the first half of Predator 2 is probably the most clustered, overdone, overproduced, and just chaotic filmmaking I've seen in a very long time. It is an eyesore how often the cinematography frames are just filled with a bunch of people, as many people as they can jam on screen at once. In a police station, out on the streets, just walking around from place to place, anywhere in particular, is just jammed and full to the brim of people doing things and making big reactions while doing those things. It is ridiculous how many people are there. Which does kind of add to the chaos, sure, but it gets a bit overwhelming, and then it kind of loses its charm about 45 minutes in. So it's like, this is just so cluttered and difficult to follow now. What are we doing? It's not controlled. It's not intentional. It's just, let's throw as much people on as we can without any level of artistic really understanding of what we're doing, because this is kind of a parody of the 90s and how we take things not seriously enough when we're talking about gang warfare and murders and heat waves in Los Angeles, right? For a subject matter like that, you'd think it wouldn't be as hokey and lighthearted as it's trying to be. That is ridiculous to me. With those elements on top, it just becomes this absolute nightmare cluster of just stuff happening at you. All of that goes to say that, again, I still like the first half more than the second half, because it's unlike anything I was expecting from it, and it's unlike something I've seen for a very long time. To go from this restrained, well-crafted, terrifying, terror-inspiring original movie to which was very much coded in 80s cheese and camp, to then go to the self-parody reflection of the 90s with everything happening all at once is such whiplash. It's such whiplash that I saw it as a good thing for at least the first 30 minutes. I'll admit it. It doesn't make the movie better overall. It just makes it more interesting to watch, and it did contribute to why I'm saying I had fun watching it. I will say that the second half is a better made movie. It's a lot more condensed, a lot less chaotic, and follows Harrigan as he chases after the Predator, more so specifically before he figures out it's the Predator, and then when he figures out it's the Predator when talking to Keyes. I should also mention that Mike Harrigan is played by Donald Glover. Danny Glover. I get them mixed up because they both have Glover in their last names. Danny Glover, which he did a pretty good job, although he also sounded out of breath all the time, but I don't want to have that discredit his performance. I was told it was a good performance, and I will say it contributed to the chaos, is what I'll say about Danny Glover. I think he definitely did a really good job of contributing to the overall chaos of the thing, so I'll at least give him that. But the second half is a lot more restrained. It follows him as he's chasing down the Predator, figuring out what to do next. And from a filmmaking perspective, it's better made than the first half. It feels a lot more intentional. It feels like they stopped messing around and kind of knuckled down and tried to actually make something that was closer to the first movie, just set in a different location. And with one character instead of a lot of other people around him. That doesn't exactly mean that it's more interesting, though. Weirdly enough, I'd say that once they stop being chaotic, disorganized, and not really knowing what they're doing, but doing a lot of it, I'd say it kind of loses its charm and becomes a little boring to sit through. But again, that's I would say that the second half is better. So what am I really trying to say here? Is it really better if it's boring? Is the first half actually good if it's that chaotic? When it's unmanaged? It's scrambled my brain pretty significantly just sitting there watching it. And all I can really kind of come to the conclusion on is that Predator 2 is not a very good movie, and it's certainly not a good sequel. But as an experience, I would kind of recommend Predator 2. If you're looking for something that's going to kind of make you scratch your head and go, not what were they thinking, just why am I still watching when I don't know what they're thinking? Right? Well, kind of inconsistent, strange, and difficult to process. Kind of the polar opposite of the next movie we're going to be talking about, which will be Prey from 2022. So stick around for that. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our third and final movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Prey from 2002, available to watch now on Hulu. That unintentionally rhymed. Anyways, for the basic plot summary of Prey, we follow Naru, a young Comanche girl, as she must conquer both the elements, her doubting family, and the Predator himself. And when I say both, I realize that's more than two things, so all three of these things. The elements, her doubting family, and the Predator, in order to prove herself as a hunter. Now, that seems like a very simple plot summary compared to people being dropped in Central America, or someone being in like LA during a crime wave, a heat wave, and also having to deal with finding the Predator while dealing with the special agent. And let me tell you, it really is. It's a very simplified plot in comparison to the other two. Even more simplistic than the first movie. And does that work in Prey's favor? Short answer, yes. Long answer, let me tell you how it works in Prey's favor. One of the biggest reasons that I have always wanted to watch Prey is it's got this interesting place in my mind. For context, when I went on a senior trip, I wanted to go to Hollywood. So I went to Hollywood with my aunt and my uncle. And we drove all around Hollywood. And I remember seeing dozens of posters for different movies that were releasing around that time. Specifically, this was in 2022, right? And so I saw a lot of posters for Prey, a lot of advertisements for Prey. And I always looked at the poster thinking, that's just another superhero movie, right? I used to think that it was just another superhero movie. Or at least it looked like it was a superhero movie. Weirdly enough, before I even went on the trip during my senior year, a friend of mine told me, no, this is a part of the Predator series. And I was like, really? It looks exactly like just a standard superhero movie. The girl on the poster, Naru, looked like she was wearing a green mask, and it looked like a follow-up to, I don't know, the X-Men or something like that. But it was just kind of interesting to hear it from that perspective. And then I suppose I forgot that it was a part of Predator. And then when I figured, oh, I should probably talk about the Predator movies, I was like, oh, isn't Prey a part of it? I've kind of wanted to watch that for a while. I'll give it a shot. When I gave it a shot, I found out that Prey is a really good movie. If I'm being honest with you, I am glad I watched it and want to watch it again, quite honestly. Prey is probably the best example of a movie in a series that didn't need to exist, and we didn't really need it to be there, but it goes to great lengths to justify it being there, and it also kind of earns its reputation of being good because of the work they put into justifying it, right? I'll start off with the basic idea of it. First off, I think the idea of following a Comanche girl, specifically kind of a teenager who has to prove herself as capable and able to actually take on animals in the wild, is a really good setup for Predator as a concept. Predator being called a predator quite literally makes anything relating to nature or anything directly connected with nature, hunting specifically, it makes it work kind of in tandem almost immediately. One thing I held about the original Predator movie is that it's interesting to look at it from the perspective of this is about soldiers being dropped into Central America. I don't see the connection between that and, I suppose, nature hunting, but I also don't want them to be hunters, right? If Arnold Schwarzenegger was like walking around in camouflage, or more so the hunting type camouflage with his deer hunting rifle and out hunting deer with his group of buddies who are all buff and brawny, there's no real sense of terror or fear to that or anything that's really all that interesting to watch. It's something that I found interesting. If the original Predator was actually just about some guys going on a hunting trip, I'd be like, that's dumb. Because the Predator is an alien from a different planet. It doesn't really represent nature on Earth at all. But when you take something like Prey, where you have a core concept that is built off of kind of a cultural, I suppose, connection to nature, or at least the basic idea of Naru wanting to be a hunter and hunt animals in the forest, you've automatically won me over more, not just because of that basic idea, but also because Naru, being a teenage girl who feels the need to prove herself, is infinitely more interesting and also gives her there's a better way of setting up struggles for her than Arnold Schwarzenegger and his group of like 7 buff guys, right? Any situation Naru gets herself into is going to be more of a struggle because of that setup, of that sense of kind of helplessness of possibly being a teenager or being at least a bit younger, maybe not as strong as she needs to be, but still running headfirst into danger. It makes the setup work that much better. I will also say that Prey has probably my favorite incarnation of the Predator that I've seen so far. I have only seen the first 2, sure, but the other 2 don't look all that good, and I like this one in Prey a lot. I'm so biased towards it already that I'll probably go into the other 2 if I ever watch them thinking they're not going to be as good as the one from Prey. Honestly, I think the idea of it is really cool. They basically made a version of the Predator that's a lot more melee focused and called it the Feral Predator. And instead of having a metal mask, it has this like skull shaped thing for a mask. And the cloaking device is still there and really high tech, but it's a bit more reddish whenever it gets hit. It looks a lot more like a blended kind of chameleon type thing. And a lot of his weapons are a lot more, he's got like an arrow instead of a laser gun. He's got this really cool axe but throwable knife thing. It's really cool to see. It's so difficult to narrow it down what I don't like about the design, if I'm being honest with you. Even the color of the Predator in this movie is just it works so well on so many different levels. And Prey itself as a movie works so well on so many different levels. I would highly recommend watching Prey if you never have. I really enjoyed it. And part of that was also due to the music. I think they needed to try something new with the music. And when they tried something new with the music, it worked profusely. So many things. I can't even narrow it down to just one specific thing about Prey that I like. I can say this, it's definitely better than Predator 2. Is it better than the first movie? I don't know yet. Maybe it is. But maybes are difficult to narrow down. And what we can narrow down is not a maybe. And that is the fact that this is the end of What to Watch Wednesdays for tonight. Thank you all for listening into the show, and thank you all for tuning in. I will be back next Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. here on 88.1 The Burg with the next episode of What to Watch Wednesdays. If you also want to keep up with What to Watch Wednesdays, follow What to Watch Wednesdays at What to Watch Wednesdays, all one word, no caps, no spaces, on both Instagram and YouTube. Again, I will be back next week on Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. here on 88.1 The Burg, where I'll be telling you all what to watch. Good night, everybody.